Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the channel. In this video, I'm going to explain what are seller concessions and why don't we see them very often in Puerto Rico. Because if you've purchased property basically anywhere else in the mainland US, if you're a purchaser, you might have asked for seller concessions, or if you were selling a property, you might have been asked to offer seller concessions. And so in this video, I'm going to explain why it's not something that we see very often in Puerto Rico. It is allowed, but we just don't see it too often. Ready? Let's jump in. So what are seller concessions? In a nutshell, seller concessions are when the seller of a property agrees to give to the buyer some of the proceeds of that sale to help them cover their down payment or their closing costs, right? So it's literally a gift that's coming out of the proceeds of that sale going to the buyer. And so right there is kind of a tip about why this isn't super common in Puerto Rico. The one thing to keep in mind about Puerto Rico real estate is that it is way more competitive than most other parts of the US. This is because it's a relatively small place, right? It's just about 30 miles by 100 miles wide. It's got about 3 or so million people, right, locally who are living here and might be looking for properties. But then you've got about 5 million folks with Puerto Rican ancestry or Puerto Rican roots that may be looking to come back and find a property for themselves to retire or just to vacation at, or maybe they want to live in both places or move back. We don't know, but that's a very common scenario. Plus, you got everybody that comes and visits the island and just falls in love. And so it's a very competitive market and with a very limited inventory, right? And so because of all these things, that's why in Puerto Rico, you tend to see a lot of properties that are listed cash only, or you see a lot of listings that are not subject to appraisal, which not subject to appraisal, to be clear, that doesn't mean we can't appraise it. It doesn't mean that you couldn't buy it with financing. It just means that the seller is not going to care what the appraiser says their property's worth. So if you offer $200,000 for a property and that's what they were asking, but then it appraises at 180 or appraises somewhere below that contract price, if you signed a contract that says not subject to appraisal, that means that you as the borrower or the buyer is going to need to bring the difference in cash to make up that gap that it didn't appraise at, right? So that would, in this example, that's an extra $20,000 on a property, and then your down payment, and then your closing costs. So you get the idea. But because Puerto Rico is so competitive, we don't see a lot of deals with seller concessions because most sellers, they want what they want. They don't care what an appraiser is going to say. And so it can be difficult to request those kinds of concessions. The moment where in the whole process where this conversation happens is going to be you've made your offer, you've got it accepted. Now it's time to set and agree upon all the terms of your option to purchase agreement, right? And so it would be at that moment that you would request, a certain amount of seller concessions, depending on your loan scenario. And so just keep in mind that for maybe a lot of sellers in Puerto Rico, that's going to be perceived as weakening your offer, right? Because imagine if you're in their shoes, if you're a seller and you want what you want for your property, you don't care what an appraiser is going to say, and then you have a buyer that's coming to you the buyer is going to be requesting that you give them some of the proceeds of the sale. Right there, that would weaken your offer, right? If somebody else comes along and they're going to offer the full value with no seller concessions, that's a stronger offer for them because they're going to make more money from it. They're not giving some concessions away. Or, the other strongest offer is the full asking price cash offer with no seller concessions, right? So that's going to be, they're going to make the full amount right there, cash and all of that. So this is something to keep in mind, is that if you're a buyer, if you're considering requesting seller concessions, it will be perceived as weakening your offer. So keep that in mind. It's also going to depend on the appraised value for that whole scenario to work out. A quick note on how much you can potentially ask. It really is going to depend on the loan program and your FICO score and how much of a down payment you're making, because some loan programs let us go and request up to 6% in seller concessions. So like whatever the sales price is, 6% of that value, you could request for the seller to give it to you towards your closing costs and down payment, which would be super swell, right? And we see this in lots of other parts of the U.S., but here in Puerto Rico, it's much less common, and that's basically the reason why is because it's so competitive here that sellers know they can ask pretty much what they want to get for their property, and if they wait long enough, they might be able to get it. And if they start agreeing to things like seller concessions, they know that they're going to be giving you back some of those proceeds of the sale. So that's the reason, guys. That's why we're not seeing a lot of seller concessions. It is a thing. We do see it here from time to time. It also requires that the property, that it appraises on value or higher. Otherwise, you'd be asking the seller, if it appraised low, to be giving you additional funds, and that's just going to probably be a non-starter. So anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. If you're still here watching at the end, thank you very much. Maybe give me a like or hit subscribe, or maybe drop a comment or question below. But thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, if you want to know if you might qualify for making a purchase in Puerto Rico, my contact info is going to be in the description below. But thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.